Man, it's just such a shame that I got poisoned by that demon from the further and I'm gonna die like any second now. But I guess at least if there's one like little shining light in the distance to look forward to, it's that I will be dead and I won't have to be in any more of these movies. I just get to move on with my life. Well, I guess not life, but move on with whatever the afterlife looks like in this franchise and figure out what awaits me. And oh shit, is this the further? All right, I guess I gotta find like the good place then. Or wait, no. Please don't tell me this means I'm gonna be back for all the movies even though I'm dead. Oh, fuck. Oh, I better at least make some fucking bank out of this, though, let me tell you. All right, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another horror franchise review. This time around, I am, of course, looking at the Insidious franchise. Okay, so before we get started, there's a lot of people that really love this franchise, and if you're here because you want to, like, see me talk fondly of these movies, this is not the video for you. I don't really like them, but that's my opinion and we're allowed to have different opinions. So, we have to start somewhere.
It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
All right, so we of course have Insidious from 2010. This is the one that started it all. Here's the thing about this movie is that it was instantly iconic. Does iconic necessarily mean good though? Not in my brain, it doesn't. I think that it has cool ideas, it does cool things, but at the end of the day, I still don't much love it. Do I think that like the further and like the metronome and the violin like screaming strings and the jump scares and like the lipstick face demon and the Tiny Tim song and all of these things are iconic? Yeah, I do think that they are pretty good in general, very loosely, because I don't actually like all of those things. Right off the bat, to give this movie like, credit where it's due, I do think that the further is kind of a cool idea. I like that there's this dark realm kind of thing where these evil entities and ghosts come from, and I think that visually it's interesting. It's like our world, but dark and blue, and for some reason they always spawn with a little lantern to guide them, which I think is strange. I also think that the Tiny Tim song is actually pretty good. Now, I also talked about the lipstick face demon being iconic, and that's one of the instances where I don't think it's a good thing. I do not like the lipstick face demon design. I'm sorry. I just think he looks stupid. I genuinely think he looks like a knockoff Darth Maul and that he's just goofy and not scary at all. When I first saw this motherfucker, I laughed out loud because it wasn't scary. It was just kind of dumb to me. And obviously that is a subjective thing in my subjective opinion, but it is something that lessens this movie for me because he's supposed to be like the big scary thing, and then I look at it and I go, that's stupid looking. Wait, am I supposed to be scared? I don't even think the movie itself is scary at all. And also, I should be clear, I have watched all of these movies before, but I rewatched them for this video. Maybe that affects my scary rating, but there are other moments in the other movies where I genuinely kind of got a little bit scared by them because they were good scares. And this movie I just don't think has good scares. I think it's just kind of very cheap, generic stuff. Speaking of generic, I think that the movie in general is is pretty generic. It's basically just a haunted house with a family story. And also, it's written by Lee Winnell, I think directed by James Wan, and the both of them also made the Conjuring franchise, I'm pretty sure. So when you have Patrick Wilson being the father in both franchises, and it's both hauntings, and also this is just a very generic haunting story, like aside from the fact that it has astral projection and like the characters actually going into the ghost realm, this is a very generic haunted house movie. I'm sorry, but it is. And like it doesn't really do anything unique in that regard aside from those specific things that I talked about, because it's the same story where the wife is the one primarily being like affected by this and kind of has to be like, hey hubby, things are wrong here, we need to do something about it, and the husband is going, I don't know about that. And like, I'll give Patrick Wilson, his character's name is Josh, but I'm going to continue to call him Patrick Wilson. I'm going to give him some credit because he does move the whole family into a different house. Turns out it's not the wife, it's their son Dalton that's, you know, being not haunted, I guess, but like drawing the attention of like ghosts and entities and whatever. Also, they have a baby, so the baby, there's baby stuff like baby monitor and whatever, and then there are the two sons and one of them ends up in a coma. So it's basically the same idea of like one of the children being possessed, you know, and like just kind of acting strange. It has the bones of just every haunted family house movie that you've ever seen in your life before. So when I watch this, it doesn't feel special. It just kind of feels like they took one of those movies and put some weird astral projection stuff into it and gave it Lin Shaye. The other thing that I find hilarious about this franchise is that it's carried heavily by Lin Shaye. Her character name is Elise, but again, I'm going to just keep calling her Lin Shaye. They kill her in this movie. If you don't know the franchise, that may be a little surprising to you because, as I just said, Lin Shaye carries this franchise. In fact, she's in every single movie, all 5 of them, all 6 of them actually, because she's guaranteed to be in the new one that's coming out. How is that, you might ask? Well, the franchise sure does have to do a bunch of things in order to make that work. I just find it so funny that they kill Lin Shaye in the very first movie and then they immediately regret it because then they have to deal with the fact that Lin Shaye is fucking dead in their franchise. And I do kind of find that fun, learning how they're gonna incorporate Lin Shaye into the movie. I don't know, I kind of find it fun that they have to dig themselves out of that hole that they dug. There is another thing about this franchise that haunts me, and it is Specs and Tucker. These are 2 characters that annoyingly are in all 5 movies, and I genuinely despise them. They are here as comedic relief, and I do not like them ever. Well, maybe there's like a couple of like one-liners or jokes that get me in the entire franchise, but this movie particularly I think is one of the ones where I dislike them the most. I think they're annoying. I don't think that they're funny. I think that they just drag this movie down a heavy amount because they're actually pretty prevalent here, and that makes me sad because I don't want to see them at all. The interesting thing about this is that Specs is played by Lee Winnell, who is the writer of this movie and also the next movie and the movie after that and the movie after that. So Lee Winnell wrote this role and gave it to himself. I also just think it's interesting because, again, he's writing himself to be funny, but I don't find him funny at all. I like some of the movies that Lee Winnell has done. He helped create the Saw franchise with James Wan. He made the Upgrade movie. He made the modern, like 2020 maybe, Invisible Man movie, which I thought was pretty decent. And then he's made shit like this. I would be remiss not to say that Specs and Tucker in these movies give me heavy Ghostfacers vibes. You know, Ghostfacers from Supernatural, except they're worse than Ghostfacers. I don't like it. Why do they have to be in these movies? I guess just to give you the plot in case you don't know, the family moves to a new place and they start getting haunted after Dalton like falls off a ladder and then he ends up in a coma and weird things things start happening around the house. The mom specifically starts seeing like ghosts and figures and stuff. Again, like I said, Patrick Wilson opts to move them out of that house and into a different house because it's really affecting the mom. He's also being affected, but he's doing that typical dad shit where he just kind of locks himself away and isn't available at all and just becomes emotionally distant. And then Lin Shaye gets invited because she worked with Lorraine, which is Patrick Wilson's mom, back in the day to help Patrick Wilson as a child. Basically, Lin Shaye lore drops and says, Patrick Wilson, you have the ability to astral project when you sleep. And I believe that this has been passed down to your son Dalton, and that he has left his body and has gotten lost in the further. This leaves his body open, and beings from the further are attracted to life, and they will do anything to get it. And then Patrick Wilson has to do the metronome hypnotism thing to go into the further to look for Dalton. In this movie, Lin Shaye specifically tells us that she does not have this ability to astral project. She says that this is like a unique gift that some people have very rarely, and that she is not one of them, but Patrick Wilson and Dalton are. So yeah, Lin Shaye can't astral project. I'm sure that will stay true for the rest of the franchise. Yeah, we also learned that there's like a bride in black that is basically been following Patrick Wilson since his childhood, and that's why they originally had to like do this whole thing and erase his memory so he would forget about it and stop astral projecting, and why he doesn't remember any of this stuff. And the thing that I noted about this is that weirdly, this gives Patrick Wilson's character a weird trans reading. Annoyingly, this ends up being kind of transphobic and not great representation in the second movie. But there's this shot specifically where they mirror Patrick Wilson and the bride. The bride's name is Parker Crane, of course. It's very interesting because it specifically mirrors them, and it's like looking in a mirror to see yourself. We also see that he cares about his looks a lot. Earlier in the movie, like plucks out a gray hair and goes like, I told you to get out of here, or something like that. And there's a scene where he's getting into bed or getting ready for bed with his wife, and he's applying like wrinkle cream to his eyes, like his little crow's feet area. All of these things together just make it so you could read his character as being trans, but like denying that fact. And like this Parker Crane bride in black character can kind of be seen as like the evil manifestation of that self-transphobia thing going on. And I think that's kind of unique. Was that intentional? I highly doubt it. But, you know, that's the fun thing about media, is you can interpret it however you want and take your own meaning and readings from it. But yeah, this is how Lin Shaye ends up dying. The Parker Crane bride ends up inside of his body and kills Lin Shaye, and that's like the twist of the movie. Is she's dead, and the Parker Crane bride is still hanging around and being evil. Yeah, that's Insidious, the first movie. It's let's move on to the next one, shall we?
I heard voices in the hallway. Is there something wrong with Daddy, Mom?
All right, and now we have Insidious Chapter 2 from 2013. Yeah, we got a direct sequel, everybody. The movie opens with Lin Shaye, but as a young woman helping young Patrick Wilson and his mom Lorraine. And not only is this weird because it's entirely unnecessary, we know that all of this happened, it's basically just a way to like shoehorn it in. The other weird thing is that they have Lin Shaye do the voiceover, like a dubbing thing, for this younger actress. And it's really bad. If you don't know this movie, you might say, well, I guess it's probably just to give Lin Shaye like the cameo, right? Like, let her be in the movie somehow, some way. Even if it's not her physically, you can get her voice in there. No, because she is in this movie also, just physically as herself, as her older normal self. So I genuinely do not understand what the point of changing her voice in the beginning is. It just makes it weird and feel wrong. But yeah, this is directly following the events of the first movie. So there's an investigation being held for like Lin Shaye's murder. Nothing ever comes of that, actually, now that I think about it. They basically just say, yeah, well, it wasn't Patrick Wilson, so time for this whole plot to leave the movie and never be talked about or brought up again. But basically, Parker Crane, the bride, is now inhabiting Patrick Wilson's body and is doing so for pretty much the entirety of this movie, which is like the main thing about this movie that I enjoy. I think that this is kind of a fun idea. I like seeing Patrick Wilson technically play a bad guy. I think that that's fun. I also like the way that they make him feel very unsettling in this movie. There's a lot of like little things that make you go, ooh, something's off about you. As time progresses, they physically make him look like he's deteriorating. I think that that effect is pretty cool. They also bring in some guy, I think his name is Carl, and Carl is an associate or friend of Lin Shaye. He's here to help deal with things alongside, of course, Specs and Tucker. Let's go! My favorite characters are still here. It doesn't feel too bad in this movie. They kind of like try to compensate for Lin Shaye missing, but then they don't actually like do much compensation. It's just kind of Lorraine and Carl. And even Carl, let's be clear, Carl does not have an important role in this movie, actually. He doesn't actually do anything of substance or importance. At the end of the movie, he hypnotizes Dalton and Patrick Wilson so that they forget that everything happened. It's just strange to me. They bring Carl in and they have him do all this stuff, and he's a fine character. There's a scene that I really like him in where he's talking to Patrick Wilson and he's basically caught on to the fact that it's not Patrick Wilson, and he's like doing this whole thing, and it's a very great like tense scene between the two of them, and I really like him in that. But at the end of the day, he just kind of gets like knocked out and almost killed, and then he hypnotizes them at the end, and that's all he does other than just like walk around and get scared by stuff. The Patrick Wilson being like not Patrick Wilson thing I enjoy in this movie, and I think that it sets up fun things in general. I like that they're in Lorraine's house, so the childhood house of Patrick Wilson, and I like that it sets up these weird family things where Lorraine and the wife of Patrick Wilson are like, they're seeing things and they're trying not to bring them up to Patrick Wilson because he's being weird about it, and so it creates this like weird dynamic in the family that I enjoy. I enjoy Parker Crane more than Lipstick Face Demon as a villain. Lipstick Face Demon, you never really get any backstory or lore to. The nice thing about Parker Crane is that you get his whole backstory and everything. His mom was terrible and would influence him to kill people, and she forced him to like dress up and be a girl. I don't really know why that is. It's kind of a similar idea to like Psycho a little bit. It's got like a icky nasty trans representation vibe. Obviously this isn't good representation, nor should you even say that it is representation. Let's just kind of ignore that entirely. But yeah, like Lorraine, I guess, knew Parker Crane when he was alive and in the ICU because he tried to castrate himself, but he's like a serial killer that killed a lot of people and whatever. Then he dies and he latches onto Dalton for some reason. But I do enjoy Parker Crane. The design is very fun. The Bride in Black design, I think, is sufficiently creepy and disturbing. I choose to ignore the fact that they kind of make it look like an evil trans woman, and I just take it as like a creepy Bride in Black because I think that that's fun. I kind of enjoy the parts where they're like at the Parker Crane or the Crane house in general. They're like, I don't know, exploring the house to learn more about them, and it's just more creepy stuff going on. I think that the end of this movie is anticlimactic in a way. I enjoy the part in the real world part where Parker Crane inhabiting Patrick Wilson is going after the family and attacking them and trying to kill them. But the actual part inside of the further, it's not great. Basically, Lin Shaye shows up because of course she does, and Carl is there with Patrick Wilson, and they basically end up at the Crane house and they defeat Crane kind of by like bashing his mummy with a chair. Or a rocking horse. That's what Lin Shaye does, and then that is what does it, I guess. Kind of a weird ending in that regard, but I like the in real life part of it. Oh yeah, this movie also incorporates weird like time shenanigans. We see that Patrick Wilson in The Further is able to manipulate things from the past, like in the first movie when the door opens and the alarm goes off in the house. That was Patrick Wilson that opened that door and set off the alarm. And I think that that's a cool idea. I'm not sure that it makes the most sense, because anytime you do that, you're just going into weird paradox stuff. But, I think that it's cool in concept. And, generally speaking, I don't mind this movie as much. Of course, I hate Specs and Tucker still. And there's a lot of like generic stuff just kind of happening in this movie, and a lot of like non sequitur, unimportant things also going on at the same time. But generally speaking, I think that this is an improvement over the first movie. And it's time to talk about the next one.
You have to be very careful. If you call out to one of the dead, all of them can hear you.
All right, and now we have Insidious Chapter 3 from 2015. Yes, so this one's written and directed by Lee Winnell. So Lee Winnell is, of course, going to do weird shit with Specs and make me roll my eyes so far back into my skull that I get a fucking, I don't know, aneurysm or something. But I kind of like the setup for this movie. This is a prequel, in case you were curious. That's how we're bringing Lin Shaye into this now, is we're doing it before she dies. For some reason, this is the one that feels the most separated from the, I don't know, story of the franchise, because it's not even really Lin Shaye like dealing with Lin Shaye stuff. It's Lin Shaye trying to help out another family, some girl named Quinn, because Elise is this genuinely like kind of quirky but very sweet old lady, and I really enjoy that. I think it's fun to watch her. I said she carries this franchise, and I mean that. If she were not in these movies, I would not give a single shit, and I would probably hate all of them. I like that she has a bit of a like self conundrum going on in this one. Her husband is passed by like a year or something, and she tries to reach out to him, but in doing so, she attracts the attention of Parker Crane. Does it really make the most sense? Probably not, but she attracts the attention of Parker Crane, and Parker Crane in The Further starts choking her or something, and is basically like, you will die by my hand. And this really sets off Lin Shaye, and she's like, well, I give up. I can't keep doing this psychic stuff anymore. Oh yeah, also she's astral projecting and doing all that stuff. Remember when she said that she didn't have that ability in the first movie? Yeah, you can ignore that completely, because she does that from now on for all of the movies. Which, again, I find very funny, because Lee Winnell wrote all of these movies. So he, of all people, should know the continuity of his stuff, but just chooses to ignore it anyway. But yeah, I like that Lin Shaye has this whole, like thing where she's scared of death and she doesn't want to keep doing this anymore. The girl finds her and she gets invested, and because Lin Shaye is a genuinely good person in these movies, she ends up agreeing to help Quinn. I enjoy Quinn and her story and her family story. Basically, her mom died a little while ago, so she's upset about that, and she's not getting along super great with her dad, and so there's like that whole thing. And then she reaches out to her mom, which attracts the attention of the man who can't breathe. That's the villain of this one. And eventually it ends up getting her like hit by a car. Very like genuinely, I don't like, it's impressive she lived the way that this looks in the movie. So she ends up with 2 broken legs, and she's in a wheelchair, and she's stuck in her apartment all day. I think that it creates for some fun, unique setups and scares. This is gonna sound weird, but I truly appreciate and enjoy how much they fucking toss Quinn around. Obviously that sounds fucked up, but I say that because every time it happens, it makes me cringe, and that's the intent of the movie, and so it works on me, and it feels like the stakes are kind of raised, and like, she has 2 broken legs, she's not as capable as she normally is, and every time you've seen her get like thrown around, you're like, no, please, not her legs. There's one part at the end where she's being like puppeted or controlled by the man who can't breathe, and he's walking around in her body, and he like kicks her casts so so they like break, and then walks just on her legs, and you hear the bones in her legs creaking, and it's just like, ugh, yucky. I hate it, but I love it because it's a very cool idea and it's very well done. As for the man who can't breathe, I think he's fine. You know, he's not really referred to as a demon. I think he's just a real guy that died that is evil. He's this entity that likes to bring people into the further or into his world of pain and suffering and make them, you know, like off, themselves kind of. And I find that, interesting. He reads as like this vile old man that loves to see the suffering in other people. And that is almost exactly what he is. And like, I find his design fine. I think it's better than the lipstick face demon, which a lot of people will think is blasphemy, but I'm sorry, I do, even though he's literally just an old man that's like rotting away and has like an oxygen mask on. It's simple, but I don't know, I like it more than the goofy ass lipstick face guy. Which, by the way, fun fact, the lipstick face demon, I believe, is physically portrayed by the composer of the Conjuring franchise. I just didn't expect that. That was an interesting fun fact that I learned, so you can have that little fun fact as well. But yeah, the story itself is fairly meh and also kind of generic. I mean, like I said, I like Quinn's story, but it's not exactly unique or special. This is also kind of technically the Specs and Tucker origin story. They get called when Lin Shaye originally declines to help, and they show up, and then Lin Shaye is like, no, we might need their help, and then this is how they meet, and it's just bad. And also, this is the part that really gets me. Lee Winnell, writer and director of this movie, meaning he writes his own character Specs. He directs his own character Specs. In this movie in particular, the one where he's writing and directing, he gives himself, he could have given it to Tucker, but no, he gives it to Specs himself, who he is playing, the line, "That's a cool name," in reference to Lin Shaye calling the other realm the Further. Now, if you're putting the clues together, you realize that the Further is the name for the other realm, a name that had to be written by the writer of the movies, which is coincidentally Lee Winnell. So Lee Winnell is sucking himself off by saying the Further is a really cool name for that place that he came up with. God damn it, Lee Winnell. I wanted to shut off the movie when that happened, and I just find that maybe funny in that I think it's stupid as all hell, but like, yeah, I don't know. People that don't like know this stuff might not know that, but I put it together in my brain. I said, you motherfucker, you're sucking yourself off right now. What is wrong with you? There's a time and a place, man. Oh yeah, the other thing, so the man who can't breathe takes like half of Quinn's soul somehow, but it's kind of a cool effect because we see that like the half of her soul in the Further is like this woman with no face and no hands or feet, and it's like this weird crawling husk of a shell of a person. And I thought that effect was kind of cool. I think that these movies, one thing I'll say is that as they have progressed, they have learned how to look a little bit better. Specifically in the first movie, a complaint that I had is that I think the movie is ugly looking a lot of the time because they use like weird filters kind of at random, and it just doesn't look very good. These movies, as they progress, I think do a better job, and they kind of get the aesthetic down a little bit more, both in terms of like in general and with the Further, but also like they start incorporating like POV shots a little bit more, which is the one good thing I'll say about Specs and Tucker's introduction or inclusion, is that they are the ones that bring that into this because they're the tech guys and they have the camera and everything. I like those shots. I think that they add something fun to these movies. So yeah, generally speaking, I think that these movies look fine by now, and I don't really have any complaint with how they look. Yeah, let's just get to the next movie.
These hauntings can be terrifying things. This was different, though. The haunted house is my family's house.
All right, and now we have Insidious: The Last Key from 2018. And you may be wondering, Ryan, how are they gonna keep Lin Shaye in this movie? What's the trick this time? The trick is that this is also a prequel. It's a prequel after the prequel, but before the original movie. this movie takes place in the same year as the first Insidious movie, which is like 2010. But yeah, I find that weird because Insidious Chapter 3 takes place, I think, in like 2007. And then this movie, the opening scroll goes like 3 years after that. So this is like very soon before the Patrick Wilson family gets haunted and involved. But this is a very Lin Shaye story, family centric movie in that it's going back to her childhood home. And this is one of the things that I really like about this movie is that we see like little bits of her childhood, which I believe takes place in the 50s. So I like the different eras here. We see the eras like 1950s and modern day, well, 2010s modern day. I think that that's really fun and it makes for some unique things. And I like the story of this one. I don't appreciate how much Specs and Tucker are involved in this. That is kind of my biggest complaint is this is the movie where it feels like they have the largest inclusion or kind of like weight in like the script at least, because Lin Shaye is just kind of working with them now and they are a team now. But she gets a call from some guy and he's like, I need help. And she's like, all right, what can I do you for, buddy? And he's like, well, I live at this address. And she goes, that's my childhood house. I can't do it, because she has a lot of scars and trauma from that place because her father was a terrible person and there was a lot of bad things happening there and ghost stuff and whatever. But then literally the next day she's like, well, actually, I'm just gonna go there anyway. I don't really understand the point of being like, I'm not coming. Okay, I'm coming. Basically, when she was a kid, she also has a younger brother. When she was a kid, her father would basically like pick on her and abuse her for like talking about this ability and gift that she has, which is being psychic and seeing things and whatever. Also, they live like off of like the compound of like a prison where they would like electric chair death row people. So there's a lot of ghosts and stuff in this place. But her father was not a good person. And then he locks her in her basement one day. She sees a red door down there. She opens it. And then her mother comes down and her mother gets killed by this thing. This is the key demon. And things get worse over time and she has a worse life. Eventually, when she's 16, she sees a ghost and she's like, hey, Dad, you need to stop picking on me. And then she like leaves and her brother is left to handle the dad. So I really like all of that. The other thing that I like about this is that the key demon makes people kill people. It like turns them into serial killers. I think that's a fun little take on it. It is part of what was making her father be such a bad person, like an abusive parent, but also just in general, it made her father kill people, which she didn't know at the time, but she's learning now, which I think is a fun revelation for her to have in this movie. So her father was a serial killer that killed people because of the key demon, and the man that called her to help her also is keeping women trapped in the basement and with the intention of killing them eventually. So there's also that going on. I don't know, I just find it kind of fun. Also, Lee Winnell writes himself to be the hero. He kills the man and ends up saving the day. So good job, Lee Winnell. You made yourself the hero. Lee Winnell also writes himself to get the girl. He writes himself so he can kiss a woman who is 10 years younger than him. That's the other thing is Lin Shaye's brother has two daughters. One of the daughters is whomst Lee Winnell kisses. And that is my least favorite part about this movie is the way that Specs and Tucker hit on these women all the time. It's gross and I don't like them and I hate them. I do like the family stuff and I like bringing in the daughters and the brother back. The brother is like antagonistic toward Lin Shaye because she left him alone with her father, but also he doesn't believe in any of the ghost stuff. But then the daughters seem to have this ability as well, so they believe her. The key demon takes one of the daughters into the further and traps her there, and then Lin Shaye goes after her, and then the other daughter ends up astral projecting to help save Lin Shaye and the daughter. So, you know, it's this whole thing, and it's kind of a mess. But one thing I will say is, like I said, I like the vibes of this movie. I like how this movie looks. The scares, I think, are getting better as the franchise goes on. I think they're improving. There are a couple of genuinely pretty good scares stars in this movie, which I don't get in most of these, so I give them credit for that. Also, I find it weird because they kind of maybe imply or hint that the key demon is the one that's in charge of opening or creating these red doors, which are the passageways to the further, like all of them. But surely that's not the case, right? Because that doesn't make too much sense. I kind of like the key demon's design. It's a little bit weird. It has like a whole nose, kind of like a keyhole, and it has keys for fingers, and it can like stick a key in your throat and lock it and make it so you can't use your voice at all, which I think is interesting. Also, really quick, I just wanted to say that I think it's interesting because this movie has Lin Shaye accidentally open the red door that allows the Patrick Wilson family to be haunted. So it's interesting because that also directly leads to Lin Shaye's own death because of the whole, bride in black thing. So just more weird tie-ins that they're just like really shoehorning them in at this point to be like, see, it still relates to the original story. Yeah, I don't know. I think this movie has good scares. I like the story of it and the vibes more than most of the movies. So I give this one some credit, but that's all I got to say about it. So it's time for the next movie.
Our family has been keeping secrets. They suppressed our memories, but I can still feel something following us.
All right, and now we have Insidious, The Red Door from 2023. This is Patrick Wilson's directorial debut, and it is also his return to the franchise along with pretty much the rest of the family. It opens with Lorraine, his mom, being dead though, so she doesn't actually return. It's like 10 years later from the original movie. Dalton is going to college. The thing that I like about this movie is I do enjoy seeing how the family has kind of fallen apart because of what has happened. Patrick Wilson is divorced. He plays a divorced dad. That just doesn't seem right. Patrick Wilson should always just be the husband that is there, but he's divorced. He's divorced now. But yeah, because of like the whole hypnotism thing and they forgot the whole year, Patrick Wilson only remembers Dalton being in a coma and Dalton doesn't remember like the entire year. It's not great for them. Those two in particular have kind of separated. Like they have like this weird kind of distant from each other vibe, which I do enjoy. I think that it's quite fun and well done. Also, Patrick Wilson nails the emotionally distant father like role. Ask me how I know.
Did you ever try and get help? Nah, I'm just trying to push through.
So yeah, I genuinely enjoy seeing the interactions between these two. The one thing I wish is that they had more actual interactions. Aside from the beginning and the ending of the movie, they're kind of just separated from each other, but like dealing with their own stuff and dealing with the trauma that they have. Trauma that a lot of them are uncovering for the first time because they don't remember it and they're learning about it. This also created just like a general rift in the family, which is what caused like the divorce and everything. So I enjoy that aspect of it. Dalton is going to school to be an artist, and this is how he evokes the red door thing and further shit again, because he's told to go into his memories and paint something from his memories, and they do the countdown like 10, 9, but whatever, and that kind of puts him in a sort of hypnotic state where he ends up painting this door, or drawing, it's with charcoal I guess, and it's the red door, the one with the lipstick face demon, and he doesn't remember what it's about. And also like he has a friend, roommate kind of, named Chris that I like. She's pretty enjoyable, and I like that Dalton gets someone to confide in, and I enjoy their relationship in this movie. This movie in general kind of does not have a lot of actual the further action, by which I mean they're not in the further a whole lot, or there isn't much going on in the further itself. The lipstick face demon isn't even really that present in this movie, but meanwhile on the other side of things, Patrick Wilson is dealing with his own shit. He's been in like this fog for a while. He feels regretful about like not being as connected to his family as he once was, and so he goes to like get help, and he gets like an MRI done and it doesn't reveal anything. He learns about his father, and his father was like a psychiatric patient and like had schizophrenia and stuff like that. So Patrick Wilson now thinks that he's just crazy and inherited this from his father, and so he goes to see the wife and they talk about it, and then she tells him everything, and then he has to go and save Dalton Dalton, much like in the first movie, and then he saves him and then they make up, and it's this whole sweet thing, right? I enjoy the story, generally speaking. I don't think that the directing was bad on Patrick Wilson's end. I think it was fine. I didn't notice anything awful about it. The one thing about this movie is that it's a little bit too on the nose sometimes for certain details and certain things, but like I didn't hate it, like when Dalton plays his mom's song from like the first and second movie, I think that that's kind of fun, but other things it's like there are other little details that I enjoy, like Dalton talks about how he likes eating oatmeal just dry, and later on in the movie we see Patrick Wilson eating dry oatmeal, and we see that these two are actually pretty close to each other. They could be able to relate if they get moved past this thing, right? But yeah, like I said, generally speaking, there isn't much like evil entity ghost stuff going on here. We get some more cool kind of fun time stuff where we see Dalton paint the painting of the red door, and he paints it with his father from the second movie holding the hammer trying to attack them, and this is how he brings up the trauma originally, going, Dad tried to kill us when we were younger. Obviously it was Parker Crane doing that, but he doesn't know that. It's this cool thing where him painting this painting is what gives Patrick Wilson the hammer in the second movie, and also in theory actually creates the door, the red door from which the lipstick face demon comes from originally. And the reason I say that is because in order to like lock out the lipstick face demon and close the door kind of permanently, is he paints over it with like black and it just covers the whole painting, and that covers and blocks the door out as well in the further. So to me, that's kind of saying that him painting this door is what originally made the door. It's this weird paradoxical time loop thing where if he didn't paint this door, then none of this would have happened, but he has to paint the door because all that already did happen. Again, stuff that doesn't really make sense, but I think it's kind of cool. At the very least, surface level, it's kind of fun and cool. I also think that there are some pretty fun scares in this movie. There's one in particular, I think it's even in the trailer maybe, where Patrick Wilson is doing like this children's memory game, and he's like flipping over the things to like remember and match them, and like you see the figure in the background slowly get closer as he's flipping them. And I like this scare. Like, this is genuinely a very good scare because you expect him to flip it over and like the face to be right there, but he doesn't even do that, and there just crashes through the window at him, and like it's a very well crafted jump scare. Like, that's how you do a good jump scare. Insidious franchise, which is kind of not great at jump scares in my opinion. There is a record-breaking lack of Lin Shaye in this movie. She just has a small little cameo. She technically has two small little cameos. One where she does a video and she explains the astral projection thing that Dalton and his friend Chris find, and that's how they learn about what he's doing. But then at the end of the movie, Lin Shaye is just kind of there and talks to Patrick Wilson and is like, everything's gonna be okay. You did good, Patrick Wilson. And then she disappears because she's dead. Also, Specs and Tucker are unfortunately in this movie, but it's the smallest little cameo ever, so I'm happy about that. Thank God. This is the one moment where I go, okay, their humor is fine because it doesn't interrupt the movie at all. It's literally just a tiny little cameo. But yeah, I don't think that this movie is really groundbreaking in any way. I think it's fairly fine. Again, it has very generic things going on about it, but that's mostly the whole franchise. And it doesn't really feel super climactic. It feels anticlimactic towards the end, where it's just like, oh, that's it. That's all we see of like these evil creatures and whatever. Okay, I guess. So, it's a little disappointing, but I like the continuation of this family story. I think that Patrick Wilson and Dalton have a fun little thing going on here. So yeah, I enjoy it as a continuation of the story, but now it's time to rank the movies. All right, so now it's time to get into the meat and butter, and that's not the saying. All right, so now it's time to, talk about what order I would place these movies in order from how I like them to which I did not like them. And this is going to upset a lot of people because in last place or fifth place, I have Insidious. Yep, it's the first movie. I actually think the first movie is the worst movie. I think it's the most generic out of all of them. I think it has the worst writing out of all of them. I think it has the worst acting out of all of them. them. It has the worst scares and look out of all of them. Again, it's very iconic. It introduces a lot of the iconic parts of this franchise that make it memorable, but I don't think it's a good movie because of those things. I just think that it sets the franchise up to be better. Do I think that the franchise ever really gets that much better? No. Frankly, I rated all of these on Letterboxd 2 out of 5 stars. They're all 2s. I could have gone lower for some of them, but I feel like they're like, despite me not liking them, they're just kind of like fine. Anyway, in 4th place, I have Insidious Chapter 3. I don't think that this is a bad movie. I think it just feels the most disconnected from the franchise, which isn't inherently bad. I like Quinn and I like her story, but I don't know, at the end of the day, it doesn't feel that impactful, and it's earlier on where they still haven't nailed it, and Lee Winnell's still up to his bullshit, so yeah, it's here. In 3rd place, I'm going to put Insidious The Red Door, the Patrick Wilson directed one. I like the story of this one. I just feel like it's lacking in a lot of the other aspects. I wish there was more interactions between certain characters. I wish they did more with the further and stuff like that. I generally like the beats that they take in this movie, but sometimes it's a little bit like nostalgia. Hey, remember this? And aside from like the actual Patrick Wilson and Dalton storyline, I don't think I would care about this movie much, so that's why I'm leaving it down here. All right, and then in 2nd place, these two are the ones that I swap back and forth the most and could honestly go either way for me. But right now, currently, I'm going to say Insidious Chapter 2. I think that this is a fine movie. The reason why I put it as high is because I like the uniqueness of making Patrick Wilson the villain and having him be like a puppet. I like the Parker Crane backstory, and like the further is pretty creepy in this movie. Again, I think it's fairly generic. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't go anywhere or isn't very important, and it's just kind of whatever sometimes, but it has elements that I think are vastly better than some of the other elements of the other movies, which is why it's higher on the list. And then in 1st place, that means I'm putting Insidious The Last Key, and I think it's weird that this is my number 1 movie in the franchise right now. Again, it could swap with Insidious Chapter 2, but I think the reason I like this is because I just like Lin Shaye. Like, she carries these movies, and this is the most Lin Shaye heavy centric movie, and I like her family getting introduced, and I like the different eras between the 50s and 2010, and I like the sisters or her nieces, and I like the story with her brother and her father, and I think that the Key Demon, while not my favorite entity from the movies, is fun and has the most fun real life impact where he's causing people to be like serial killers. I also think that this is one of the creepiest looking movies and has some actually good scares in it, so yeah, it's going to be my number 1. And that's my ranking of the Insidious franchise. I'm curious to see if I will like Insidious out of the further. I'm hoping I do. I also hate Specs and Tucker, so I'm hoping they're not in out of the further. But that's this movie, or that's this franchise, and it's not my favorite. I hope I didn't offend you too badly by not liking this franchise. What are your thoughts on the franchise? What is your favorite and least favorite movie? I assume a lot of people's favorite is the first movie, and so me putting that in last will not be great. But you know, it's my opinion and I'm sorry. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like, please like and subscribe. It means a lot to me, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.